welcome to the Cardinal News of Virginia, a podcast from Cardinal News. We are a nonprofit news outlet covering Southwest and Southside Virginia at cardinalnews.org. The Cardinal podcast is sponsored by Muneris, serving communities with expert group benefits and Medicare solutions. I'm Dutchie Jessee, and today I'm talking with our founding editor and columnist, Dwayne Yancey. Dwayne, welcome back to the pod.
I'm happy to be here.
You love writing numbers in your headlines. You love to headline something, 10 reasons to do this, or 7 ways, people should do this. So this latest that we're talking about today for the podcast has the number 25 in it. What's the headline?
Yes, 25 because this is 2025. And this is 25 more places on the western side of the state that our candidates for governor, Spanberger and Earle-Sears, should visit for policy lessons. And it's 25 more because I had a previous column of 25 places in Southwest Virginia. As in like the most southwest of Southwest Virginia, basically, that portion west of I-81, some call the coal counties. Mm-hmm. And that all originated with a question that our political writer, Elizabeth Beyer, posed to the candidates for lieutenant governor and the Democratic candidates for lieutenant governor and attorney general during the recent primary, which was a simple question that had a fascinating answer, I thought, which was, how far west have you been in Virginia? Yeah. At the time, we had 12 candidates, the primary going on, and there were the 3 Republicans who were already picked, and then the Democrats who were running. And out of those 12, only 3 had been to the westernmost county in the state, Lee County. Mm-hmm. 2 of those were current office holders, Winsome Earle-Sears, the Republican candidate for governor, who's lieutenant governor, and the Republican Attorney General, Jason Miyares, who's running for re-election. Of course, they both have the advantage of having run before. And then Jay Jones, who wound up winning the Democratic primary for Attorney General, had been there apparently as a child. I was told it was with his family. Mm-hmm. Parents. So I'm not sure what age he was, but it was not in the context of the current campaign.
Yeah.
And since we're a news organization that seeks to cover the western part of the state, that seemed very interesting. That only 3 of the 12 candidates then running had ever been to the westernmost part of the state. Mm-hmm. So that prompted a column on, here are 25 places, not just in Lee County, but all of that part of Virginia, that candidates ought to visit for policy lessons, not for sightseeing, but to learn things about policy.
Yeah.
And that column proved so popular. It's like, well, it's like a movie. You get a hit movie, you want a sequel. So this sequel, which is 25 more places, but this is a broader geography across, pretty much all the western part of the state. So I've got things, from Highland County to Greensville County, mm-hmm. and all points west of there.
Yeah, and we should remind people that the primaries have come and gone now. So we have our statewide, like the top of the ticket office candidates now. Who are they? Just give us that summary, if you would, for anyone who doesn't know.
Sure. Let me begin very basic. Virginia elects 3 statewide offices for state government. The governor. Our 2 candidates are Abigail Spanberger, the Democrat, and Winsome Earle-Sears, the Republican. So no matter who wins, we will have our first woman as governor, mm-hmm. Ever. Lieutenant governor, the Democratic candidate is Ghazala Hashmi, state senator from the Richmond area. And on the Republican side, John Reed, who has been a conservative radio talk show host in the Richmond area. Hashmi, I should point out, is the first Muslim and first South Asian to be nominated for statewide office in Virginia. And between her and Earle-Sears on the Republican side, we have two immigrants on the statewide ticket. Earle-Sears is from Jamaica, Hashmi's from India. So we're making some history there. And then for Attorney General, as I mentioned, Republican Attorney General Jason Miyares is seeking re-election, and the Democratic candidate is Jay Jones, former state delegate from Norfolk.
Yep. All right. So getting back then to the 25 places that our two gubernatorial candidates could benefit from visiting. And as you said, this has more to do with policy and understanding some really key things, not just tourist attractions. We have plenty of those, plenty of reasons to visit otherwise. So let's go down. We might not make it through all 25, maybe we will, but let's start with your top item. What is it?
These are not necessarily listed in order of importance.
Okay.
Maybe a little, but not specifically. I did try to group some of them. But it starts with Interstate 81, which probably is, the most
right.
important.
Top of mind, yeah.
If you're going to get to this part of the state, you probably have to go on 81. Of course, 81 involves state funding. So, there's a state issue right off the bat. And 81 is often not a very pleasant place to drive. The basic challenge with 81, for those who aren't familiar with this road, one, you're congratulations for not being familiar with it in a way.
Exactly. Look at you.
Yes. It has a whole lot more truck traffic than it was built for. When 81 was designed back in construction started, I guess, in the 60s. The anticipation was that truck traffic might take up, 10 to 15% of the traffic load. Now, on parts of the road at certain times, truck traffic is about 40%. And the problem with truck traffic on 81, and part of the problem with 81 period that you can't really get around is, it goes through some mountainous terrain. So, I-95 on the eastern part of the state is pretty flat. 81, you get lots of ups and downs. Well, trucks go real slow going up, up the hill, and then real fast going down the hill. So, that's why there are truck lanes and so forth. But that creates very uneven traffic speeds, which can also be dangerous. And that's the basic problem. You can't legislate away the mountains.
Well, I mean, you could have just written I-81 period and then just gone to the next one, because I think everyone knows if you say that, oh, we know why.
Yes.
That's a big deal. You have previously written about a musician who wrote a song, Sue Foley, is that right?
Yes, yes. I was about to thank you for bringing that up, because that was sort of, my little guilty pleasure there.
Just writing some music. Yeah. But she describes it, what is she, two-headed snake?
Yeah, the two-headed snake. And Sue Foley is a blues singer, blues guitarist from Ottawa, Canada, not a place where you expect a lot of blues singers.
Right.
And in her youth, she spent a lot of time driving from Ottawa to Nashville. Well, that involved spending a lot of time on 81. And she wound up writing a song a few years ago called 81, but the refrain is cruel old 81. And I find it just a delightful song, and did an interview with her last year about the origin of the song. And it starts off, it's a two-headed snake that winds its tail from the mighty Appalachians to the gates of hell. And that sort of sets the same. She's got some great references in there to Bristol. And Bristol is the birthplace of country music that she pays homage to. So I invite everyone to check out that song.
Yeah. Check out your column too from that, because it's pretty funny. So take us next to the New River Valley in particular. You've got a couple places on your list that you feel like our candidates should be visiting.
Sure. most of the places in general, or many of the places I should say in general, are sort of with the economy in mind. So, yeah, I mentioned the Corporate Research Center at Virginia Tech as a place that is, generating sort of the new economy in this part of the state. A lot of, tech startups there. And then, later, one of the 25 places is the Volvo plant in Pulaski County. Not just because it's big, although that alone, should get some kind of attention. But Volvo is also making now electric trucks. So they're not the only ones around here. There are other electric truck makers. In fact, we have a little cluster of electric truck making. But Volvo will be the centerpiece of that. And yeah, there's a lot of political attention nationally to electric vehicles.
Yeah.
Which I get, and whether they should be, encouraged or discouraged or subsidized or not. And that's sort of off in one category. But then in another category that we don't think about are electric trucks. And while sales of electric cars has been softening for various reasons, sales of electric trucks are spiking. Part of the reason for that is when trucking, when you and I go to buy a car, we're buying one at a time.
Right.
A trucking company, with a whole fleet, they're buying a whole bunch of vehicles. And some of them are, I don't know if they're going all in on electric, but they're certainly going big on electric. So, when they place an order, it's for, lots and lots of vehicles. And so, I would think both parties would want to be aware of that. So some of these things may fit more comfortably in the philosophy of one party than another, but they're all sort of, facts on the ground that, need to be acknowledged.
What about, I mentioned the New River Valley, and another item on your list, the heart of it is Radford University there in Radford in the NRV, but the partnership they have with Carillion is what you're specifically citing. What's that about that you feel like they should be aware of if you don't think they are already?
We need nurses. There's a big nursing shortage. Years and years ago, the hospital in Roanoke, going back to when it was Roanoke Memorial, pre-Carillion days,
right,
had its own nursing school. Over the years, that evolved into the Jefferson College of Health Sciences, which a few years ago, Radford took over, and it's now Radford University of Carillion as a big training center for nurses.
At Community, yep.
It is not the only, Radford's not the only college in the state that produces nurses. Right. But, it's ours on this side of the state, and it's a big part of the economy. And
they have long been known at Radford. I mean, I happen to be a Radford University alum, and back in the 80s and 90s when I went, they had been known already for a long time for the nursing program there, for education and some other things. But Radford has continued to be a very well-known institution for that particular field in the western part of the state.
Yeah,
and beyond.
And Radford is not just in Radford. This part of this particular program is in Roanoke. And it's important for candidates to understand, once sort of the shorthand of communities. Once upon a time, Roanoke was a railroad town.
Yeah.
When back in the days when Norfolk and Western was headquartered here. Well, now it's Norfolk Southern, and it's in Atlanta. And if you were to ask people, well, what is Roanoke today? The shorthand would be it's becoming a healthcare center. And the immediate thing to think about is the medical school and the Fralin Biomedical Research Institute, which also makes the list. But the third leg of that triangle, if you will, is the Radford University Carillion nursing program. And so candidates should understand that and be familiar with that.
Well, you mentioned Fralin, so we'll go there next.
Yeah.
And that's the Fralin. Wow, can I get the name right? Fralin Biomedical. You better say it. Do you have it in front of
Maryland
you?
Biomedical Research Institute.
Okay, so I was on the right track. Yeah, and
Yeah.
this has been in Roanoke for many years now, but for any candidate who's not aware of it, and this goes again, Dwayne, to the rebuilding of Roanoke from being a railroad town to a lot of medically based industry and research, and Tad Dickens has written extensively on this for a series we did at Cardinal News. So what's the elevator pitch to our gubernatorial candidates?
The elevator pitch is this is the center of the biotech industry that is growing in the Roanoke Valley. And they need to understand that is the engine, the growing engine of the economy. In the most recent state budget, there's been state funding for labs in Roanoke, not specifically connected to the Institute, but sort of growing out of the cluster that Institute is helping create. And if a candidate wants to understand the Roanoke Valley, this is part of what they ought to, what they need to understand.
So let's go south and hit Danville again. This theme of research and sort of advanced technology, and you mentioned the IALR, the Institute for Advanced Learning and Research, down in Danville, which was formed after the collapse of the textile industry.
Yes, Danville was one of my favorite stories. Many people's impression of Danville was formed, maybe 25 years ago when the textile industry collapsed. Danville had been known for two things: textiles and tobacco. Tobacco had already been, on the decline anyway, and then textiles sort of collapsed seemingly all at once. And for a lot of people, that that was their image that was formed. Oh, poor Danville. Well, what they've missed is in the past 25 years, Danville has become, sort of the comeback city, as it has built a new economy based on advanced manufacturing. And the center of that is the Institute for Advanced Learning and Research. About the time the textiles collapsed, some community leaders in Danville went to Virginia Tech and said, basically, we need your help. And they understood, textiles weren't coming back. Danville needed to build a new economy, and Virginia Tech as a land grant institution had the that was what they did. The IALR came out of that. It is very difficult to explain what the IALR does, which is why candidates like to visit there. It does do some research. They've got labs there. A lot of that is ag-related research related to the agricultural economy in that part of the state.
Right.
But a lot of it is also related to manufacturing. And they've got whole wings there full of big machines. I couldn't begin to tell you what they do. Training people for whatever, the companies in the area need. And they also have people coming from all over the country going through various training programs there. So it's a fascinating place, even though I couldn't begin to tell you what all they do.
Well, and again, I'm going to bring up Tad's name, Tad Dickens, our technology reporter, because this report he did on vertical farming, basically, but also just controlled environment agriculture. He was down there at the IALR for part of that, because one of the facilities they have there is a CEA center, basically training people and experimenting on, indoor agriculture, basically very controlled settings. But we talked about that. His article talks about it at length, and in our podcast, we talked about, this is primitive. This is, how we get our food is pretty important. And in the face of climate change, it's even more important. But it's also just about learning these things and experimenting, and they're doing so much down there at the IALR, and that's just one of the little corners there. So you're right that a visit would be probably the best way to really get a handle on that.
And I've been in that lab, or at least looked through the window at it.
Mhm.
And it, it's fascinating. The time I was there, they were experimenting with different types of lettuce to see which types of lettuce grew best indoors. And they've got all these racks under lights, and they can. I grew up on a farm. The problem with growing food outdoors in its natural state is you were subject to the weather and pests and all the other hazards of being outdoors. When you grow things indoor, you can be very precise. You can give them more light. I almost said sunlight. It's not really sunlight, but you can give them more light. You can control.
That's the key word, Dwayne. Control. It's controlled environment ag. And when you're a farmer traditionally on the land, which we need and appreciate, but you're right, we can't control the weather. And there's only so much pest control that you can do. Anyway, so great point.
On a side note,
okay,
that this will get us off track, I realize. If Virginia ever has legal retail cannabis, it will be grown indoors.
Yeah.
The medical marijuana we now have is grown indoors. Part of that is for security reasons. But also part of it, because you can, control the environment and you can produce more crops over the course of a year than you can outdoors. So, what works for cannabis works for lettuce and strawberries and, anything else.
You've got a couple of transportation related items on your list, train stations. So hit those real quick for me.
Sure. One is the Amtrak station under construction in Christiansburg, and the other is the train station in Bristol, which would like to get Amtrak.
Right.
And the Amtrak routes in this part of the state are state funded. There's some federal money in there too, but we have those routes because the state has put up money. So that's why it becomes a state issue. The route to Roanoke, which was restored in 2017. There are some people who were very skeptical of that at the time. That route has proved so popular. There are now 2 trains a day to Roanoke. It's one of the most popular routes in the state. And there's now, I was going to say the effort. It's got the route is going to be extended to Christiansburg. The station in Christiansburg is now under construction. That involved a lot of state involvement to get it there. Some of that was money. Some of it was just negotiating with Norfolk Southern to get the preferred route to get into Christiansburg, which is more we could probably devote a whole pod to the details on that, but
maybe we will one day.
Maybe so. Once it gets to Christiansburg, folks in Bristol would love to have Amtrak extended there. And that is not a new idea, but first you gotta get to Christiansburg and then then get the rest of the way. So that's a 2-parter there for any candidate to understand the depth of feeling for Amtrak and passenger rail in this part of the state.
So they should be at the train stop, the train station, board the train, talk to the people, see what the experience is like. Is this a user experience thing that you think they should get?
Sure. I mean, it's more just to understand that it's a popular thing. I've been on the Amtrak route multiple times, just my personal life. The thing that always amazes me, the last leg from Lynchburg to Roanoke, almost everyone on there are students.
Mm-hmm.
Virginia Tech, Radford, Well, primarily those two, because right now the
Right.
train stops in Roanoke, and
Mhm.
there's always a bus waiting to take, people to the New River Valley, and it seems about 100% students. I
Yeah.
know one night, I was on there coming back, and everybody was studying except me.
Well, I recently took Roanoke to Philly for the first time. Forgot that was an option, by the way. That's another story of it was going to be too much to fly. This was for work. And my friend goes, well, just take the train. I was like, oh, yeah, Amtrak. Um, and what's interesting, Dwayne, when you start in Roanoke at 6 in the morning, there's just a few of you on there, at least in your car, right?
Mhm.
And you just have all the space in the world, and it's all quiet and wonderful. And then with each stop, you get more and more people. But as it heads to Central Virginia and then Northern Virginia, and then you're through Baltimore and then up there toward Philly. It was funny to me because I thought, well, this is similar to just the population here that we cover. We cover for Cardinal News, anyone that doesn't know, Southwest, Southside Virginia. It's a huge geographic region with not as densely populated centers, lots of rural pockets and suburban type of population centers. And it was just funny to sit on the train and watch the busy happen and watch the things get more crowded and but it was business travelers and people doing it for personal reasons. And then I read later about Roanoke, I think had the fastest growth or the highest ridership in the past year. Maybe Amtrak put that
Mhm.
out. So you're right, it's growing in popularity. It's becoming more of a more more widely used. So that's all the time we have for this portion. And so I would encourage people, if you want to know what else is on that list, to go to cardinalnews.org and look for Dwayne's work. They also can get our free newsletters. Our website is always paywall free. And then, Dwayne, you do have a Friday newsletter that goes out every week called West of the Capitol, where you focus on politics, but with a particular focus on what's happening that affects our part of the state, the western half of the state. If someone wants to pitch a column idea for you or just get in touch with you, how can they do that?
They can just hit me up at Dwayne@cardinalnews.org.
Awesome. Thank you, Dwayne. I'm sure we'll talk again real soon. Appreciate your work.
Sure thing.
I want to thank everyone for listening to the Cardinal News of Virginia. And thank you to our sponsor, Muneris, also to Cardinal News' Zach Shelton for production support. Read our paywall free news at cardinalnews.org. I'm Dutchie Jessee.